What's up everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and today I wanted to do a video about rumbles. Specifically, a particular insight that I had about what makes a rumble a rumble. And so to prepare this video, I started making a kick and a rumble and then a whole track. And now I'm deep in a rabbit hole and I feel like there's several different things that I want to talk about. And I'm not even sure in which order we should talk about them. But maybe let's start with the philosophical concept that triggered this video for me. And that is the difference between tonal and atonal sounds, specifically in your bass frequencies. So the difference between a tonal and an atonal sound is basically that a tonal sound repeats its waveform several times, creating a pitch. Like a sine wave would be a very classical example of that. A perfect example of atonal noise is, for example, white noise. It doesn't have a particular pitch. It doesn't resonate at a particular number of times per second. So it doesn't really sing. It doesn't have a particular tone. And so most music has these two types of sound in it. Pretty simple, right? But when we move this to the sub-bass frequencies, we quickly realize that this atonal noise-like quality is actually what attracts me, at least what attracts me in a rumble. So now let me play you a tone really deep down low, and then let me play you white noise, but with all the top end filtered out. So it's going to sound more like brown noise, I suppose. You might need to turn the volume on these up a bit to be able to hear them even, depends on what kind of a system you're listening to. However, if you followed my video on techno rumbles, you would have seen me taking a kick drum and put it through a reverb, right? To create something that I call the smear, where you make your sound blurry. But in fact, what it's doing is it's making the sound behave more and more like white noise, like low pass filtered white noise. And then I was thinking about it even more. If you think about a kick as a clicky atonal transient plus a body that rings out at a certain frequency, well then, which of these two parts is actually the rumble that I'm so attracted to? Well, I don't think that it is the body where it rings out and it continues to be tonal if you put it into a reverb. No, in fact, it is the click at the start. Remember my video on techno kicks, where it just describes that a kick is nothing more than a sound that goes pew over time really quickly, and then it stays stable at a certain tone for a moment. So it goes pew really quick, creating something that goes click. Well, in fact, it's the sharp transient click that when you put it through a reverb, it creates something like a wall of white noise. Let me show you. So here inside of kick 2, we've got everything muted except this main fundamental sweep, which I just made a click out of. And look what it does. It plays all the frequencies once, right? It sweeps down. And so when you put that into a reverb, it sounds suspiciously like white noise. And then if you low pass it and you mono it, that sounds suspiciously like a beautiful techno rumble. Well, what it actually means is that to create a beautiful deep rumble, we don't necessarily need to put a kick through processing. We just need that transient energy at the start. If you put a tonal sound like a sustained kick into a reverb, you're going to be adding a lot of that sustained tonal sound in the reverb and then in the rumble, and that might make your mixing life harder if what's really attracting you is actually the atonal section of the rumble. Does that make sense? I feel like it's a bit crazy. Maybe it's obvious to everyone, but it wasn't obvious to me. I don't know why they didn't put these things together sooner, but I find a rumbly low end like that relatively attractive. So this simple click from kick 2 is what I'm putting through a big old Valhalla reverb into an OTT just to keep the volume very consistent. Very low passed, with a big resonant kind of peak around 45 hertz. Extra low pass to make it feel really underwater. I have to turn up the volume quite a lot on my end now because that really dips the perceived volume, right? And then, oh yeah, we make it mono. Sounds good. I make it mono by only taking the left channel, by the way. It's, you can just do like this, but I prefer left. And then I add in two things. I add in a Saturn and an LFO tool. The LFO tool is just to make some space for the transients. But this Saturn is doing something really interesting. What it's doing is it's taking the frequencies in the mids and just pushing them up. And so why would you increase the mids like that? And a lot of you are going to be thinking, yeah, so it can be heard better on small speakers. And that's true, but that's not the reason that I decided to boost the mids specifically on this rumble. The reason that I decided to boost the mids specifically on this rumble is because at the end of my mixdown, when I soloed a particular frequency band, I noticed that the kick was too dominant in that frequency band and the rumble was not present enough in that frequency band. Let me show you. So this is without the mid-range boost. And if I solo just this frequency band here on the master, what I'm noticing is that I'm hearing just the kick. Click, 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 click. The rumble doesn't feel big at all in these frequencies. And so I want the kick and the rumble to be much closer to each other in volume. And that's important. And so what I did then is I add that in, and then on the master, they're much closer to each other in volume. So if your ear tries to describe what the mid frequencies sound like, they sound like a rumbly mid-range rather than just a clicky percussive transient of the kick. Does that make sense? It's also worth noting that I started making this stuff outside of my studio on a laptop with headphones, and I was just going in circles because everything that I would change in the bass just sounded different, but I couldn't tell if it sounded good or bad. And then once I plugged in into the big speakers here with the acoustic treatment, it was suddenly super obvious what was going wrong. Like the core sounds of my drum weren't well designed. There were all sorts of details that were just obviously wrong once you hear them on the big speakers, but on my headphones, it wasn't so obvious. So if you're feeling frustrated with the design of your big elements, of your kick, of your rumble, of your low end, and you're working on small speakers or in a bad acoustically treated room, cut yourself some slack. I used to get super frustrated about it because what I thought sounded amazing one moment sounded garbage another moment, and my perspective kept shifting and I could never figure out why things sounded bad. Well, on a more professionalized sound system, it becomes much, much more obvious. These sculpting, these big elements, the subtleties matter quite a lot. And you don't get those subtleties on headphones or on small speakers. I'd love to be the guy who's like, oh yeah, you can make everything on any kind of system, because for the most case, that's kind of true. But for this, for the low end, for getting the details on the low end, I just really wouldn't recommend it. So yeah, so sometimes soloing a certain band in your mix and listen to how elements relate to each other in that band can tell you if something is too dominant in a particular mix band, and then you can go into that element and just change only those frequencies from that element to nudge them closer to where they need to be in relation to all the other elements. If doing this would give me too much mid-range overall, on the master I can always still scoop that out a little bit. And so a last rumble lesson that I want to leave you with today is that in this kind of genre, a lot of the tracks have almost no dynamic range, right? And that really makes a rumble and a kick kind of stand out as this warm blankety feeling that doesn't really move a lot in the mix. Once it's playing, it's just kind of bathing you in this warm, nice vibe. And so I did a pretty ridiculous self-master on this track. So without the master chain, it sounds like this. With it, it sounds like. Cool. Let me add in the hi-hats for fun. Now this composition is not going to win any awards. It's a super basic 909 hi-hat and a 303. By the way, I used Drumazon and Fossion, the new versions from the D16 group. I love those two machines very much. This is not sponsored or anything. I have no connection with them, but thank you for making these things and making this beautiful interface and for not doing subscription model software. In the past, you've seen me use samples a lot for kicks, but these days, what I'm really enjoying is this punch box when you simply initiate it and you start from a sine wave. I really like the sound that comes out. It's very forward, warm, and modern. Steal my settings if you want, together with the rumble. I love that rumble so much. Okay, I should just stop. Anyway, I hope this helps you a little bit think through your design of your low end. It's a bit intermediate and advanced level techniques in this one, I admit, but it's kind of like a continuation of the Techno Rumbles mastery video that I did quite a while back. If you haven't watched that, go watch it now. If you want to learn electronic music more generally from me in like a classroom kind of context, go follow my Foundations of Electronic Music course, level 1 or level 2. Come show us on the Discord channel what you did with this. Leave a comment to show me some love. Tell me if you love dirty, rumbly low ends yourself. And until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care. Bye bye.